Devan, what's your thought on all the conversation around the Eagles offense and what they should do? Because there's a lot of people out there that believe the Eagles should take away play calling from Kevin Patullo and Nick Sirianni should take it over. I say ride it out with Patullo and see if he can improve here. But, Devan, I know a lot of people feel like it should be taken away from him. Where do you come down on the Eagles play calling situation after another tough one in Dallas?
Well, so I think I haven't held back I don't think anyone has when it comes to the play calling for the majority of the season, in that it's a bit vanilla, but it's also kind of on trend with what we've seen and what we've been talking about with this Eagles offense for the last 4 years. This isn't anything new in terms of the overall conversation that we're having. So I think at a certain point it stops becoming about the offensive coordinator and starts becoming, maybe it's the identity of this offense. And I know that they turn the ball over uncharacteristically on Sunday, but for the most part, while people, complain that it's vanilla and it's conservative, they succeed at not turning the ball over. That being said, I think all of us would like to see a bit more aggression. I mean, when that game started and the Eagles went up 21-0 fairly quickly, I expected that from the get-go. I feel like I was the only one, at least at our station, who was predicting the Eagles could win by a pretty wide margin on Sunday. So I was staying on the sideline feeling pretty good about myself for a while. And then, it went 3 and out. I think they had one first down in the last several drives to end the half. They had 17 seconds left, didn't go for even a field goal at that point. And then we know what happened thereafter. So, it's a head scratcher. And I think the most frustrating and confusing part to me, and I think a lot of fans, is I don't know the solution. We hear a lot of it's execution. It's not play calling, it's execution. And 14 penalties, that'll do that to you. But we're going into week 13. So how's execution still the main issue?
Yeah, it's very telling, Devin. It's like, we're talking about, we're not in the building. And, we talk about Kevin Patullo and his play calling, but the players are adamant that that's not what it is. It's one of those things that you really can't put your finger on. And then you talk about we're in the week, 13 or 14 or whatever
13.
it is. And we're making bonehead decisions. I feel like it's more so that they need to have a come to Jesus meeting. Do you feel that way, that they need to just go in the locker room and just kind of air out all this dirty laundry and just get back on the right track? Do you think that'll help?
I don't know if I think they are doing that. And you guys brought up, you played a bite from Jordan Mailata last night at Chickies and Pete's. And I found a lot of what he said extremely helpful because he kind of took us inside. Elliot asked him, is Sirianni holding guys accountable? Yes, he is. He still does the thing where he calls out numbers specifically when we watch back the tape. He addressed and I know Landon Dickerson also kind of addressed the 5-man front and, not being prepared. And I think what stood out to me from what Jordan Mailata said was that, a lot of the outside noise, and I think a lot of it so far has been about Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. Now Kevin Patullo seems to be being pulled into the mix, but he said it's just brought them closer. So I don't know if I still think the culture and the team and being in the locker room even last week, after the, rumors you guys just talked about Derek Gunn with Jalen Hurts, they seem fine in that locker room. It's not like the vibes are completely off. And look, we're only in there for 45 minutes a day. So I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but I don't think that there's necessarily a culture issue. And that goes back to what is the solution? So if you're saying that Nick Sirianni is holding guys accountable, if you're saying it's execution, and Jordan Mailata even admitted and said, when you commit 14 penalties and they're really costly ones, especially when it's, a big first down, you can't win a game. But why is that happening? And that's the biggest question. Who is the person? Nick Sirianni constantly preaches tough, detailed together. He preaches habits and having good habits in practice because that'll come through on game day. Well, guys, we're not really seeing good habits because we're seeing so many penalties that are costing these guys games.
Yeah, and the way they're playing kind of flies in the face of everything he says. It's like he's saying this, but they're not playing that way. And Devan, you mentioned the decision, or whatever you would call it, to not try to get points before the half. They got the ball back after the Cowboys scored their first touchdown. It's 21-7. There's 17 seconds to go. They're on the 28. They have 2 timeouts. Devin, they're in a dome. It's favorable kicking conditions, and they had been throwing the ball well in the first half. So, like, the idea of them dropping back and maybe hitting a 20 or 25-yarder to AJ or Devontae seems pretty plausible to me. Devin, what was your thought in the moment? Because I didn't like that. I was like, come on, let's try to get 3 here. And then after the game, Tom Rinaldi on Fox, he was interviewing Dak and George Pickens, and Dak said when they knew they could come back was when they got into the half only down 14. Like, they felt momentum there. And I was thinking back to, like, maybe the Eagles could have stopped that momentum if they were just more aggressive. What were you thinking in the moment, that decision to kind of just, let's go into halftime?
Yeah, it was a head scratcher to me, but I also feel like it's on trend for what we've seen throughout the season and in them, having some time left at the end of the half and deciding to take a knee. I think if you had, even just gone for 3 there and tried to make it down as far as you could to make it easy for Jake Elliott, yes, there's a glare, but the glare wasn't on the side of the field where he would be kicking. I just don't see how that would have hurt, especially with a quarterback who doesn't turn the ball over. Like you said, they had been throwing it really well thus far. And it goes back to, playing not to win, but playing not to lose. And when you're only up by 14 points, it might feel like a lot at the time. But like you said, it would be a complete momentum shift if they kicked a field goal there at the end of the half, get the ball back to start the second half, and go down and score again. Like, then you can maybe take your foot off the gas a little bit. But it felt like they took their foot off the gas way too early in this game. And obviously, it cost them the game.
Yeah, you can't do that. Devin, before we get to your thoughts on the Bears and the game coming up on Friday, which now feels like a huge one and a must-win for the Eagles to stave off, more concern here, and they're standing in the NFC. What's your thought on the Eagles bringing someone in to help? I know there's a lot of, we're talking today about the play caller, and should it be Nick, should it be Petula, but once in a while a team will bring in outside help just to give a different perspective. A couple years ago when the Eagles made the Super Bowl the first time against the Chiefs, Vic Fangio was actually here as a consultant, and he was helping them and just giving thoughts. There's a few former head coaches, offensive guys that are just sitting at home. Brian Daboll, who was with the Giants for a couple years, obviously. Doug Peterson, who there's a lot of familiarity with and great moments here in Philadelphia. What's your thought?
Daboll work with Jalen before?
Daboll did work with Daboll.
He benched him.
He did. He's part of benching him. But
okay, in Alabama.
He worked with him in Alabama. Devin, your thought on bringing in
everyone wants him here.
Bringing in a consultant to kind of help out a little bit.
Well, you're forgetting one very big name, that's Frank Reich, who, we know Nick Sirianni is a very big fan of his. I wouldn't be against it. I also think, you guys have been talking throughout the start of the show about, I guess, the public perception of taking play calling duties away from Kevin Petullo or giving them back to Nick Sirianni. And I do think that's a factor. I don't want to say that's the biggest factor, but if you bring in outside help, I think it just depends. They'd have to be very careful in the way that they did it, right? Because it didn't seem like a desperate move with Vic Fangio in the Super Bowl, but clearly that didn't really, work out for the Eagles because they lost that one. But I just worry that maybe they'd be a little concerned over it looking desperate. And I think that, like what Kyle says, or I forget who was saying it.
Was it smart? If it was probably
away from Kevin Petullo. Like that publicly is not going to look good. That's going to scream, we're in trouble and we're feeling desperate. And I think right now they need to just have the same confidence.
Circle the wagons. Yeah, they definitely got circle the wagons.
Yeah, well, it would, if they do anything that is drastic, it's going to come across as panicky. I mean, it is. Now, if it works, who cares? But if it doesn't, it does come across that way. Right. Devin, let's end with this. The Bears on Friday. When the season started, I looked at that game and I was like, this is a good spot for the Eagles. At home, short week. The Bears probably will be improved, but not that much. And now they sit at 8-3, and it's suddenly a huge game because the winner has the inside track to at least the 2 seed probably, and the loser's on fraud watch heading down the stretch of the season. Devin, your thought on the game Friday?
So, I think it's a good opportunity for the Eagles to right the ship here. I think given the Bears' run defense, which isn't their strongest area whatsoever, I want to see some more action from Tank Bigsby. And look, I'm not saying that Saquon Barkley should be benched. I'm not saying that at all. But talking to Saquon after the game on Sunday, he seemed out of answers. Fred Johnson seemed out of answers when it comes to the run game not being able to, get off. And obviously the offensive line and their health is a massive factor in that. But even Saquon himself said, it's not just the O-line. I'm sick of people, saying that and using that as an excuse. It's me. Like, I've been in funks before. I'm in one now. I'm going to try my hardest to get out of it. Well, while he tries to get out of that funk, I say give Tank Bigsby the majority of the carries and see what he's able to do, because he's averaging like 8 or 9 yards a carry, where Saquon is in negative yards for the most part, especially last Sunday. So I would like to see them try some new and creative things in the run game. That being said, this offense isn't really one that identifies with new and creative plays. But I think it's a good opportunity to try and get the Eagles run game going. I think they can, because I'm not saying that the Bears are frauds. I know the Eagles and Bears have been, partners throughout the season in terms of knocking down NFC North opponents. But I think that the Eagles will come out on top and will not be the loser of the fraud watch game.
You can't be loser of the fraud bowl game. You just can't be. We can't have that. Watch. And they are 7-point favorites, so a lot of people think they will as well. Devin, we appreciate hopping on. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you for the game on Friday.
Thanks, guys. See you Friday.
There she goes, Devan Kaney.